273, Pete. Not quite the same as repeat.
Nice.
Which was one of Pete's many nicknames when he was growing up. You have Pete and repeat. Somewhere up in heaven, that guy's looking down laughing.
Classic.
Welcome back, folks. We know Pete's a little fuzzy today. There's some fuzz in the line, I guess. But we're going to get through it, and we appreciate you joining us for the Rebel Edge. And as usual, we're going to start off with the Macro Minute. Macro Minute, world's largest sovereign wealth fund, easy for me to say, loses $34 billion in Q3. So if you think you had a bad Q3, somebody had a worse one.
Well, I know we've got a lot of a drag here, and I apologize about that. That's most likely on my side. But I would be focused on the volatility right now and the velocity of that volatility that's happening, John. When you look at, we were just a week ago or less, on last Wednesday, we were trading at 18s, and then we spiked all the way up the other day, up towards 23, never actually quite got there. A lot of people thought we did, but I don't think we did. But then all of a sudden, now we're back underneath 20. So volatility, there's a lot of volatility within
Jared,
the volatility right now in the market.
Puts up all the fancy stuff on the screens, folks. Also takes care of fantastic futures.
Fantastic futures.
There you go. That one has to be Bitcoin today, Pete. Has to be, because it traded through 31,000, 32,000, 33,000, 34,000, almost touching 35,000 today, up 12%. It's eased just a little bit, but this is all based on that ETF and a judge, basically, Pete, that we can cover later in the show, ruling in Grayscale's favor.
Yeah, Bitcoin is certainly, I think that is the focal point right now. When you're looking at futures, that's the problem that we face right now as far as the markets themselves, because of how about this big pullback down as well. So this has all happened in a very short period of time, certainly affecting a lot of things, not just Bitcoin, but a lot of those other stocks somehow connected, whether they're miners or whatever, certainly watching those volatile markets as well, John.
I know that we have to get through a lot with a little time, Pete, so we're going to go right to IONQ, which was down hard. This is a quantum computing giant, and their chief scientist, Dr. Chris Monroe, announced that he is leaving the company. It certainly doesn't seem like he's leaving in shame or anything, but he wants to go back to academia. This is the professor of physics and electrical computer engineering at Duke, Pete, who founded this company, and he's going to go back to academia instead of sticking around, and that looks like why the stock is down today.
Right. I think it's important to just note the fact that this is not a big negative necessarily. Yes, the stock is going down for maybe the right reasons, that he's leaving, he's that he's getting shoved out or he's jumping out. I think it's just something where it's a transition. And I think because of that, it's probably worth taking a look at this stock, because of the fact that they built something great. They still have the CEO, they still have others. And I think that this gives an opportunity for us to at least look at this one very closely and say, you know what? Is this the right time maybe to jump in? I certainly think it's worth a look, and I'm going to be looking very closely at this name.
AGNC. This one falling big time. They reported preliminary results that didn't look so great, I guess. These are for their Q3 earnings, and we had unusual activity in the puts, meaning somebody just days ago was saying, you know what, give me some of these puts. I think the thing's going down. You see two separate occasions on the screen there, folks, of people buying puts in big numbers. And guess what? Both those puts paying off pretty big today.
Yeah, and this is in a category, John, where you've got an amazing amount of debt. Now, that is part of what they do, but we're also seeing these stocks in that category, Annaly being another one, the REIT world, where they're getting hammered pretty good. Yeah, they've got great yields, John. Of course, that's why everybody follows them. The problem that people don't often understand, fantastic, but if the stock is going down 25% and you've got this yield, that's why you're buying it, you're still losing. And I think people have to recognize that. Is this a company that's in terrible shape? I wouldn't say that. But at the same time, it is very, very close to 52-week lows for, I think, all the right reasons. So I think I'd be very careful right now in the REIT area. And I don't know that you have to rush in to get in there. I think that this direction is going to continue to the downside
Well, what
for a little
about
while
Bitcoin,
longer.
Pete? We opened the show with the fantastic futures saying, boy, Bitcoin traded all the way up to almost that far from $35,000. That makes it up 110% year to date, Pete. It's pulled back a little. It's just below 34,000 now. But Mara, which is Marathon, Coinbase, COIN, as well as Riot, all up big. And that's because Grayscale basically was going through against the Security and Exchange Commission, Pete, and a judge ruled in Grayscale's favor. Now, Grayscale has that Bitcoin Trust, GBTC. So they want to turn that into an ETF. And the judge said, hey, I don't know that the SEC can stop this based on their own rules. So that's why we saw such a significant pop, Pete.
Pulled back off of the highs, John. We're seeing the same thing happen right now to many of these various miners as well. So there is that pullback that we're seeing, but I'd even throw HUT in there as well. There's an amazing number of stocks out there that are connected very closely. Of course, we talk about the miners oftentimes. You look at names like Riot and Marathon, of course. But I'll tell you, this is an absolutely extraordinary move that we are seeing, anticipated to some degree that this is a possibility, and people are getting more and more comfortable, especially because of the fact that Coinbase has been out there in front of everybody saying, look, with confidence, we think this ETF is going to happen. So because of that, we are seeing some major moves to the upside. And then, of course, that pullback, just like we're seeing with Bitcoin itself,
right. And
we're seeing that occur as well.
That, a spot Bitcoin ETF seems more and more likely by the day, and I will cheer Gary Gensler going down in flames against this one because that guy's just screwed up the entire digital asset space as far as I can tell. All right, what about Travel Zoo, Pete? TZOO. This one reported 10 cents better than the street was looking for. They're, of course, a travel site. We all get that. Revenue was 20.6 million versus 15.9 million year over year. So they're going in the right direction on both, and the stock having one of its biggest days in a long time.
As well, John. So the combination of all these things that you'd already mentioned in terms of some of the real numbers, the earnings and the revenue and all the rest of it, but also on this buyback. And I think when people look at that and they see these repurchase, that's a big deal. That's a huge influence, I think, in a lot of people. We've seen it happen in the tech industry, of course. Consistently, you see all of these share buybacks that come out, whether it's in Apple or whatever it might be. But I think it's really critical in this particular case. This is a stock that is going up and showing growth, and that's what you're looking for. So I really like what we're seeing right now out of the zoo.
Tell me what you think, Pete, of what's going on in sports today. We obviously know now who's going to be in the World Series. And we also know that you have been saying the Pac-12 is the biggest and best conference in the land, even though it's closing up. This is its last year, apparently. So what do you think of Pac-12 football right here?
I think the Pac-12 is the best conference, and I've said this all year, the best conference in college football right now. But the Pac-12 is pretty interesting, John. When you look at it, Washington's the undefeated team. They're ranked number 5. Then you've got Oregon ranked number 8. Then you've got Oregon State at number 11. Then you've got Utah at 13. Then you've got USC and UCLA at 23 and 24. This is a loaded conference, and these guys are absolutely playing the best football that I've seen out of the Pac-12 in a really long time. So that part's impressive to me. Here's the other thing. They not only have that wonderful player that you're very familiar with, Travis Hunter, playing at Colorado, who plays on both sides of the ball, but how about Utah? Now, Utah this past week had this big game that was going to go against USC, a team they beat twice last year, as a matter of fact, one of them in the championship for the Pac-12. And I'll tell you what, John, pretty amazing to watch what they did, because they went up against the Heisman Trophy quarterback with a pig farmer playing quarterback at Utah. Well, the pig farmer won, and they had a great game. But on top of that, John, they've got a guy who's been playing safety. He's only a sophomore at Utah. He's a wonderful kid, Sione Vaki. He's absolutely impressive. Well, they've had a lot of injuries. First of all, the quarterback is not the starting quarterback going into the year, but he started this year because of the fact that they've had all these issues, right? So they've got a different quarterback running the show and a different tight end. They've got a lot of injuries. They went through 3 running backs. So they asked Sony Vaki, they said, hey, you mind playing over on the running back side as well? When you look at his numbers and you compare him to Travis Hunter, he blows Travis Hunter away right now. He is absolutely explosive. And the kid's averaging, it's not so bad. He's averaging a little over 9 yards a carry in the couple games that he's been carrying against teams like USC. So I think it's a lot of fun to see all of this. I think it's amazing. You and I know that for a long time we've had guys that are two-way players, but I think right now in college football is absolutely extraordinary, and this is taking nothing away from Travis Henry, or Hunter rather, but I think you got to look at this kid Vaki, this safety. He's got an interception. He's got 25 solo tackles. He's got 34 total tackles, and he's run for 230 yards in a couple of games he's played running back. I think they got something special over there.
What else is special about Utah, Pete? They definitely have Lincoln Riley's number. I mean, because he hasn't been able to beat them since he went to USC. They got beat twice last year by Utah, and now they just, as you say, just lost to them again. So I think USC's probably got a real issue with playing against Utah, Pete, and I think they'll be happy to not see the U on those helmets anytime soon.
Right. Absolutely. I think the second one is a fun one to jump to, John, because Monday Night Football, they last year set a record in terms of the ratings that they were getting. Absolutely just blown everybody out of the water. Well, they're not at the record level yet, but they're pretty close. And it's why when you watch a game like last night, you can understand why. It was a great game. You've got the 49ers, great football team. They've had a lot of injuries. They were beat up pretty good, John. They didn't have Deebo Samuel. They had a hurt McCaffrey. They lost their left tackle. They had a lot of different, they had a linebacker hurt. They had a lot of guys that were not participating in the game. And then the Minnesota Vikings lost the best receiver maybe in football. Well, that doesn't seem to bother Kirk Cousins. A lot of people, and you and I know a little itty bitty guy over at a financial network who used to tell me all the time, this guy's terrible. Well, let me tell you something. I think when you really break it down and you look at what Kirk Cousins has done over the last 3 years, but particularly even just this year alone, John, this guy's pretty extraordinary. Here's some of his numbers. He's number 6 in completion percentage, 69%. He's number 2 in yards behind Pat Mahomes. He's number 2 in yards per game, 294. He's number 1 when it comes to touchdowns, which is 16. So to say that this guy's not a very good quarterback is absolutely incredible to me. And he proved it last year by moving the offense down the field, scoring, putting them in position as long as the defense holds up. They usually didn't, but every once in a while they did. So Kirk has really shown, I think, a lot of people. I think it's interesting, though, John. What do you think of Kirk Cousins? I know he's not mobile. I understand all of that, but this guy's got to be, because he's not throwing the interceptions that a lot of the other guys are throwing this year. A lot of guys are struggling that we all know are great, but they're not having great years. Kirk's having another great year.
Pete, there's by the way, that same guy that didn't think Kirk Cousins could be a great quarterback, Pete, really thought that the player that started off all the kneeling on the sideline, he wondered why that guy was poison in the locker room, because he was. We don't need to belabor that point, but that guy was a real problem. And, some people chose to look at it and say, well, he should have a shot at some team. Every time they tried to give the kid a shot, he screwed it up. So I'm not terribly concerned. But anyway, back to Kirk Cousins. 35 of 45 last night, Pete. Quarterback rating or QBR of 107.2, which almost felt low because he was just connecting all over the field. And like you say, without perhaps the greatest receiver in football able to finish out that game. So I think you're exactly right. This kid's probably top 2, top 3. And by the way, Brady wasn't very mobile either, Pete.
Isn't that the truth? It's funny because people forget that side of it, right, John? I am the GOAT. And he was, let's be honest.
Yep.
I think he absolutely was the GOAT. But that being said, this is a guy who ran what, about a 5.2 40? I mean, when he ran that when he was 21 years old, he looked like he was pulling a small train as he was trying to run through his 40 time. So his mobility wasn't all that great either. But Kirk Cousins is probably a little bit better athlete from that perspective, not taking anything away from Brady. Brady is the GOAT, still the best quarterback I've ever watched. But I'll tell you, Kirk never gets the credit. And I think every once in a while, people should step back and say, well, if he was wearing a New England uniform and he was wearing that number 12, I just wonder what people would have thought, because it's not that far different.
Can you imagine if he would have got the shot to play in Boston? Now, of course, for his sake, he would have only got to play really after Brady went to the Buccaneers and so forth, because, again, Brady's the GOAT. But this kid could have done pretty damn well there. All right. Thanks for joining us, folks. Sorry we had to shorten it up just a little bit today, but we'll be back tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern Time.